Let's talk fantasy football ranks for week 12 of the NFL season. We will go through every game on the slate, and then we will break it down by the away team and then the home team. We'll put players from those teams on the screen with their rankings, and then we'll talk about why I might have them ranked that way. Some players, there's not that many interesting things to say about. So, for example, in the first game, the Bills travel to Houston to take on the Texans, where Buffalo are 5.5-point favorites. There's not that many interesting things to say about Josh Allen. If he is on your team, you should be starting him every single week. I have him ranked at 3. Similar thoughts with James Cook. If you have him, we're starting him. Khalil Shakir, though, in this week where a lot of teams are on bye, Broncos, Commies, Dolphins, Chargers, that's a lot of wide receivers coming out. And Khalil Shakir is a really solid flex option this week. Keon Coleman, who was benched last week, just as a coach's decision, maybe he comes back and has a good game. I'm not looking to put him into my lineup. I've got him at 44. He's someone that is kind of in the droppable tier. On the other side of the field, the Texans, CJ Stroud has not been a great fantasy option throughout the year. If he is playing this game, I would not be using him. Woody Marks is someone that I go kind of red light, green light on. Some matchups I'm fine with using him. Other ones I'm not. I've got him at about 29 against a tough Buffalo offense. Really the only situation where I could see myself putting him in there is if I thought the Texans were going to be chasing points by quite a bit, down multiple scores and throwing a lot to get back in the game, that could favor Woody Marks. But there's just a lot of really good options ahead of him. At wide receiver, you're using Nico Collins. And then for tight end, I've got Dalton Schultz as an emergency fill-in. If your tight end is on bye, Schultz is if your tight end is on bye, like maybe you've been using Zach Ertz, you could pick up Dalton Schultz and plug him in for this 1 week. For the next game, we've got the Steelers going to Chicago to take on the Bears in what should have been sort of a return to kicking my Bears' butt for Aaron Rodgers. I don't have him ranked for this week. I have Mason Rudolph in his spot at 19. If Rodgers were to play, I would have him ranked higher than 19, maybe 14, 15, 16 range, and someone I could pick up and just start. He has traditionally beat the Bears quite badly in Chicago, and it breaks my heart. Another player that might miss this game, Jalen Warren. I've got him ranked at 12. If he did miss, I would move Kenneth Gainwell right up into around the same spot. Not quite as talented, but neither one of these guys are world beaters. They're just really good in this system. So I would move Kenneth Gainwell right up into a startable tier if Jalen Warren were to miss time. And then wide receivers, it's really only DK Metcalf. Across all of the pass catchers, it's kind of still only DK Metcalf. Pat Freiermuth could have a good game. It could be Jonnu Smith. It could be Darnell Washington. I don't really want to try to predict any of them. And I'm really only looking for Metcalf. For the Chicago Bears, I've got Caleb Williams at 10. The Steelers defense did start the year looking pretty rough, and they have gotten a lot better recently. From the running game, it's DeAndre Swift as the lead option. This is one of his better years of his career. DeAndre Swift is having a really solid year. When the Bears need production, they have been trusting him. Kyle Monange is always a shot to get in the end zone. He's not necessarily a red zone back or a third down kind of power back. For this offense, they will go to Swift in the red zone. Just Monange gets his. He has a role in this offense. It's just not massive. I've got him at 31. I'm using Rome Odunze and then DJ Moore. I still think better days are coming for him. Similar with Colston Loveland, I think as a rookie tight end continues to develop, we might see, I think his best games of the year are probably, maybe his best games outside of the Cincinnati game are probably still ahead of him. Next game up, we've got the AFC leading Patriots traveling to Cincinnati to take on the struggling, reeling Bengals. We'll start with the Patriots. I've got Drake May, top option for you at quarterback. The really only interesting thing to say about Drake May is if you drafted him late and you have another quarterback, we got to be shipping one of these guys. If your trade deadline has not hit yet, Drake May is a weekly starter that you can use every week. So if you drafted Jalen Hurts and Drake May, if you drafted Mahomes in May, we got to try to ship one out. That's really the only interesting insight to give here. If Trevion Henderson is the lead option, the only option for this team, I'll have him at 9 against a really weak Bengals defense. If Ramondre is back, we're going to shake things up. So check back in later. If Ramondre plays, there will be a weekly short or a short TikTok video or YouTube short with a rankings update of where I would put these guys. Stephon Diggs, I've got at 16. If you have him, you kind of want to get him in. And then Kayshon Boutte, I put a tentative ranking of if he's returning from injury, I would have him as a deeper flex option. Hunter Henry is someone you can use to plug in at tight end this week. For the Bengals, I don't really like the matchup for Joe Flacco. If you have Chase Brown, I would find it hard to get away from him, but it would be I'm expecting a down week for him. And then no Jamar Chase in this game as of this recording. Maybe he gets his suspension overturned, but I don't think that it will be overturned. So I'm expecting T. Higgins to take over in that offense. I don't know that I would plug in Andre Yoshivas. I would just expect the offense to get worse. Having Jamar Chase does just add points, add expected points to an offense. And if he's gone, those targets don't just go to Yoshivas. They don't just transfer to Noah Fant, who I do have as an option for you. But some of them just go away. So I think the Bengals really struggle here. Vegas has them, 8-point dogs at home, even in a high over-under game. Let's jump to the next game where we have the Giants traveling to Detroit, where Detroit are 10.5-point home favorites. We'll start with the Giants. I've ranked it as though Jackson Dart comes back, and I would have him at 12. I don't know that they go away from what they've been doing with him, even though he's gotten hurt on his runs. I think that's a big part of his game. Got Tyrone Tracy and Singletary both as desperation flex options for you. It's about a 50-50 split. It's about 50-50 on production. I couldn't tell you which guy I like more. I have a slight edge to Tyrone Tracy because I saw him do it a lot of last year, but these are not guys I'm looking to use. Got Wan'Dale Robinson, 24. If Slayton comes back, I could consider him as a deep flex option, but I don't know that he will be. And then Theo Johnson, he's probably the second best pass catcher on this offense. Wan'Dale Robinson, Theo Johnson, and then it's kind of just a mix of other guys like Jalen Hyatt, Lil Jordan Humphrey had a day. No one that I want to be starting in fantasy football. We talked about this at the top of the video, but let's jump to the Lions. Sometimes there are teams I just don't have that much to say. Jared Goff is someone you could start this week. That's an interesting one, but you're starting Gibbs. Montgomery should be started. Amon-Ra should be started. And I guess if we're talking more interesting, I am buying in that the play calling changes, switching from John Morton to Dan Campbell, has affected Jameson Williams, and he is a bigger part of this offense. Got him at 25. Some of that is the belief in the play calling, and some of that is just there's a lot of guys on bye. Players that I would be putting ahead of him, like just for example, just on the Broncos, Cortland Sutton and both Troy Franklin would be ahead of Jameson Williams. Jalen Waddle would be ahead of Jameson Williams, which is why he's all the way up to 25. It's not necessarily an endorsement of the player in the situation as much as there aren't as many options this week. Jumping from the Lions, we've got two other teams from the NFC North. The Vikings travel to Green Bay to take on the Packers. Packers 6.5-point home favorites. It seems like Vegas does not think J.J. McCarthy takes a leap forward in 1 week. We'll start with the Vikings, where McCarthy looked bad last week. A lot of misses. I know I'm late to the party on this. I've got him at 22. Don't jump to put him in your lineup. He can scramble and get you yards, and we have seen signs of good play from him. We've just seen a lot more bad. At some point this year, I think it gets turned around with Kevin O'Connell, but now I am worried about guys like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Got him at 9 and 23. If you have these guys, this is the week where you probably kind of have to put them into your lineup. I don't know that I can trust TJ Hawkinson yet. And then in the run game, Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason could be called on to pick up some of the slack. In the second half of the game last week against the Bears, when they needed things turned around, they just turned to Jordan Mason, who was able to run the ball decently effectively. Aaron Jones returning back to Green Bay, where he spent most of his career. I'm expecting at least a decent day from him. I've got him as a starter for you at 20. For the Packers, if there is no Josh Jacobs, I think you can use Emmanuel Wilson. This team can run the ball. He's definitely not a Josh Jacobs, but he's going to be someone that you could put in as an RB2. Jordan Love, I have as a fringe starter, just like any other given week. And then for the wide receivers and other pass catchers as well, I've got it ranked Christian Watson ahead of Romeo Doubs. I'm not really looking to use Matthew Golden until I see signs of it. I'm willing to miss his first good game. I'm willing to miss his first 1 to 2 good games, really. And then there was some people that thought it could be Luke Musgrave filling in for Tucker Kraft. It has not gone that way. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned in past videos, if a team loses a player in the passing game, those targets don't just transfer over to the same position. Sometimes they just go away, or sometimes they go to other positions, which is kind of what we've seen here. Luke Musgrave has not elevated into a main tight end that we can use for fantasy football. We've got a couple lopsided matchups this week. Let's take a look at the first one. Seattle going to Nashville to take on the Titans. 13.5 point road favorites. The over under 40.5. That's a very low implied total for the Titans. Let's talk about Seattle first because they are the away team. I've got Darnold at 14. If there are good players on the Titans, they're generally on defense, but that does not scare me away. That does not mean it's a good defense. This team is just kind of that bad. There's not really anything good happening on offense, and the defense is meh. So I'm using a lot of Seahawks. Darnold is someone you could turn to this week if you're missing a quarterback on bye. Ken Walker and Charbonnet are both okay options. This is one of the hardest backfields to determine who's getting the ball. I haven't seen a rhyme or reason to it. I haven't really heard anyone with a rhyme or reason to it. It's kind of just a split backfield. Some weeks it's Charbonnet. Some weeks it's Ken Walker. I have them both as options for you. I'm a little bit somewhat back in with Ken Walker after a good game last week, but I'm ready to be burned again. JSN you're using. I've got Rashid Shaheed at 40. We haven't quite seen it from him in these first couple weeks since he joined the Seahawks, but I just can't come to say, well, we can't use him. They're not using him. They traded for him for nothing. Not quite yet. Maybe it ends up being that way, but right now he's not someone I'm really looking to use. And then AJ Barner, if you're looking to use him as your tight end, probably something has gone wrong for you, but he is a viable option. Got him at 17. For the Titans, we have some rankings here. There are not really players that I want to be using. Cam Ward at 28. There are 28 quarterbacks ranked this week, which means there's 27 other options I would rather use. Tajay Spears at 30, Tony Pollard 36. I'm not really looking to pick which pass catcher it is. If you are desperate, you can go with Iaman or you can go with Van Jefferson. Those would be your options, but I would be looking elsewhere. For the next game, let's talk about the Colts coming off the bye. They are traveling to Kansas City. Over under is 49.5, and Kansas City is favored at home for the Colts. Daniel Jones, I've got at 13. The Chiefs defense, while not elite, is still stymieing fantasy producers for the opposing team. So that's why I've got Daniel Jones at 13. Jonathan Taylor, I mean, if I'm ranked, he's ranked at 3. If he's on your team, you're starting him. There's not that much for me to say here. For the pass catchers, I've got Pittman at 13, Alec Pierce at 27, and then Josh Downs is listed as not ranked. He could be a deep option for you, but he's not within my top 40 to 45-ish options. Tyler Warren is a lot like Jonathan Taylor. If you have him, you're starting him, or you need to be making a trade somewhere else, or you have a monster team. That's just kind of how good Tyler Warren is. For the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, I've got him at 7. Kareem Hunt is really the only guy left standing for the running backs, and he's a decent RB2 option for you. He gets in the end zone in quite a few games. They go to him in the red zone. So Kareem Hunt is someone you can start, even if he's not that exciting of an option. We're starting Rashee Rice. Xavier Worthy I thought he could be a wide receiver 2 on the year. It's not quite worked out that way. Got him at 34. Travis Kelce having quite a bit of a bounce back season, breaking more tackles than he did last year. He is still part of this offense. I know people were worried that when Rashee Rice came back, that Travis Kelce would just be completely phased out, but I don't know that he's ready to just fade away yet. And he's still someone you can be starting week to week. Let's jump from that close matchup to another one of these weekly projected blowouts. We've got the Jets traveling to Baltimore, where Baltimore are 13.5 point home favorites. For the Jets, there are not a lot of options here that I want to use. I've got Tyrod Taylor at 20. The Jets seem to think he's a better option than Justin Fields. I'm not sure how much better he could be or what that would do for any of the fantasy relevant options on this team. If you have Breece Hall, I've got him at 16 on the week. I like him less than I would in a different week. I like him less than I would if it was Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson and the offense moving like they have at other times this year. But if you have him, I imagine it's hard to get away from him. And then Mason Taylor, I think I've ranked 21 tight ends. I don't rank the tight ends from every single team. So he's a desperation option, but he is someone I would go to. For the Ravens, things stay pretty simple. It's Lamar, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. The other pass catching options might hit for you. We could see a Rashad Bateman deep shot, but I have him listed as someone that's kind of unranked. You could use him. He might hit on this game, but I've got about 45 other options I would go to before putting him into my lineup. We've got an interconference matchup for the next one. The Jaguars travel west to Arizona, where they play the Cardinals. They are favored on the road, over under 47.5. Let's start with the away team. Trevor Lawrence, I've got at 17. The Cardinals have not looked great all around in the past couple weeks. There's good fantasy production, but as a team, not amazing. The strength of this team would be their defense, and even that hasn't looked fantastic. I've got Lawrence at 17, Travis Etienne at 14. On the year, we still have some guys yet to have their bye. Travis Etienne has had his bye. He's running back 12 on the year. He's just a really solid RB2. He's someone that you can still get in cheap on. This isn't quite a trade value video, but the ranking of 14, that's just kind of what he does week in and week out. I don't have Bashal Tutin ranked here. If he's healthy and able to go, he would be around running back 35, 36 with a shot to get in the end zone. Think like a Kyle Monangai. He has his role. They do turn to him sometimes in the red zone. A lot of the times they go to Etienne first. And if it doesn't quite work right away, they switch to Tutin and he gets in and gets the touchdown. And that's about the only way that I'm using him. For the pass catchers, if Brian Thomas goes, I still kind of am buying in that what we saw last year with a top 5 finish is still possible, and that it's just a little bit of a banged up player, learning a new offense. 22 is not 5. I would have him way further down than where I drafted him, but I could still be using him. And then Jacoby Myers, if you actually look at the stats for Jacoby Myers, he traded in season. He was playing under 50% of the snaps in week 1 with the Jags. In week 2 with the Jags, it increased, and I expect him to be up around 70 to 80% plus of the snaps this week for the Jaguars. I have him at 29 and Parker Washington right behind him at 30. I don't have Brenton Strange ranked for this week. When he does eventually come back, he would be an option for you, but he's not someone listed here. If we get news later in the week, we'll release an update. For the Cardinals, I do not know how to track what is going on with this team. Jacoby Brisset, I've got him at 21. He has put up decent fantasy days in the last 2 games and throughout the season when he's been the starter. But a lot of what's happening in those games is Jacoby Brisset digs a big hole by fumbling away multiple touchdowns, fumbles the ball, it gets returned for a touchdown, and he's down 2-3 scores. And then he tries to dig his way out of that hole, and that leads to fantasy success. But that's not something I really try to predict. So I'm not really going to Jacoby Brisset. There are situations where I could understand if a fantasy manager said, hey, I need to get into the playoffs. I need to make a big change. I'm going to trade away the quarterback I have for running backs or wide receivers and then just roll with Jacoby Brisset and put my season in his hands. It could end up that he just keeps doing this. We've seen this with other quarterbacks in the past, like a Blake Bortles. It's probably been 10 plus years since it happened, but there was a year where Blake Bortles had a stretch like this. He would get the Jags behind and then just kind of throw his way back. And for fantasy football, we don't need our quarterbacks to be good NFL quarterbacks all the time. I don't often chase it, but if you're in desperation mode this late in the season, I could understand it. If you're willing to bet, hey, I can get 5 or 6 or 7 fantasy relevant weeks from Jacoby Brisset for free and then get a better running back or a better wide receiver and just hope that I don't get a quarterback crater, I can understand that, but I personally don't. Same thing with Bam Knight, Amari DeMarcado situations. Like Bam Knight's a solid RB2. We've seen a week of DeMarcado being the guy they go to in the catch-up phase and looking really good for fantasy. And then last week we saw Michael Wilson fit that role. He had 8 or 9 catches in the second half of that game when they were down by multiple scores. That's not really good fantasy relevant stats or stats I want to chase. So some of what we saw last week, I'm willing to say, hey, it happened. If you caught that lightning, wonderful, but I won't be chasing it. I won't tell you not to. I've got him at 32. You could put him in your lineup and see what happens, but I'm going to look for other options. Trey McBride, tight end 1. This is probably the longest team that we've covered in the video of just dunking on the Cardinals. And then, Trey McBride, excellent. Put him in your lineup. Let's jump to a different game. Eagles and Cowboys. This one should be a little bit quicker. Eagles, you're starting Jalen Hurts. You're starting Saquon Barkley. I have AJ Brown and Devonta Smith as starters. It will hurt. There are times it can hurt, but I will be using them in my lineup. Dallas Goedert is also someone that I'm probably getting into my lineup. He's putting up starter level numbers. I've got him at 7 on the week. For the Cowboys, it's kind of the same, but just a different names, same situation. If you have Dak, he's going. Javonte Williams, yep. Lamb and Pickens, yep. Ferguson, yep. Not a lot of analysis here or really that many things to think about. You may have some questions about George Pickens and other flex options. I'm usually picking Pickens. Like looking across at the other side of the field, I'm taking Pickens over AJ Brown and over Devonta Smith. And I am in a lot of other situations like we've covered throughout the video. Let's talk about a toilet bowl game. The Browns heading to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders. I've ranked 28 quarterbacks. I've got Shedeur at 27 if he is the starter. Dylan Gabriel wouldn't get that much further ahead of him. I think Shedeur will look better with a week of first team reps, but he did not look that great in his time last week. Again, it's a struggle to lead the scout team and then jump into an NFL game without ever having really first team reps. He was not the first or second option in training camp either. He doesn't have that many first team reps. I'm doing a little bit of Shedeur apologetics here, but I've got him at 27. We're not really using him. Judkins at 13. This is an RB2 that I don't know how you're really getting away from him. And then if we are starting someone in the passing game, it'll be the tight ends and then Jerry Jeudy. Vegas is pretty bad on defense. You can move the ball through the air here. I don't know how I'm going to predict this game. Vegas has it as a very low over under. And generally, that's kind of how these bad teams go. Vegas can have a bad defense. That doesn't mean a bad team can move the ball against them. So I've got Jerry Jeudy as a tentative flex option at 35. For the Raiders, it's looked rough with Geno. Ashton Genty, it has looked rough. And I've ranked them that way, especially against the Browns. I don't really want to be using Genty here. I'd be looking to use multiple other rookie running backs ahead of him. In the passing game, there's not really anyone that I like here. Trey Tucker, I've got him at 41. Sometimes he finds the end zone and gives you a decent fantasy day, but I want to use other people ahead of him. And then Brock Bowers, an all-world tight end on a team even this bad. He'll end up pretty high in the ranks regardless. I've got him at 4. For the next game, let's talk about some more bad teams. The Falcons travel to New Orleans to take on the Saints. Let's talk about the Falcons. Kirk Cousins is back. I've got him at 23. I don't really want to use him. That ranking might feel high, but we just talked about some other bad quarterbacks that I would have ranked behind him. Sanders, Shuck, some crummy rookies. So I'm not expecting a lot from Kirk, and I think he will hold back some of these other pass catching options or just other offensive options because there's no Drake London this week. If there's no Drake London, does that mean I want to use Darnell Mooney? No. Sometimes it works out and you get a Michael Wilson. A lot of times you get like a Trey Tucker or your favorite Jets receiver, which is no one. A.D. Mitchell? Not really anyone. And that's kind of how I feel about Darnell Mooney or any of the pass catchers on the Falcons. I think this offense just gets worse. They don't have enough pieces to go in the passing game. Kirk can't really move the ball that well. Mooney is not elite. Kyle Pitts is Kyle Pitts. I'm kind of just giving all of them a hit. Got Bijan at 4. I think he'll still be able to move the ball. And then Tyler Algier, you're kind of just hoping he gets in the end zone. And often he does, about 50% of the games. For the Saints, it's Olave. Juwan Johnson has been looking okay. And then Kamara as a solid RB2. And Tyler Shuck, if you're in a super flex league and have multiple quarterbacks on bye, I guess you could use him. That's about the nicest thing I could say. Let's jump to a game with some better teams. I've got the Buccaneers traveling to Los Angeles to take on the Rams in Sunday Night Football. Rams are 7-point favorites. This is kind of a tough stretch for the Bucs. They're on a losing streak. They're hoping to stop that skid and not go to 3 in a row. Let's talk about their players. Baker Mayfield, I've got him at 9. The Rams have an excellent defense at all levels at stopping anything. They have stopped plenty of teams. So I've got Baker at 9, Rachaad White and Sean Tucker at 26 and 27 if there's no Bucky Irving. If Bucky Irving ends up playing, he'll end up as an RB2 for me, mostly based on the matchup with the Rams. And then Ibuka you can go to if you have him. He's been great for you. I would have him as a wide receiver one that I'm starting. Tez Johnson as a desperation flex. And for tight end, you can still start Cade Otton. He's kind of in that range of tight ends that some weeks he looks all right, other weeks he's not. And that's just kind of how the position works. If he has a bad week, that doesn't mean you should get away from him. That's just kind of how this level of tight end looks. It's a weekly game. If you miss, you go right back to it because he's just as likely to hit. For the Rams, it's really, really simple. This is one of the simplest teams for fantasy advice. Start Stafford, start Kyron, start Puka, start Devontae. Don't start anyone else. There are not other options here. Rams are always short. If you have them, they should be in your starting lineup. If they are not, that means you need to make a trade because these guys are really good. And on to the final matchup, Monday Night Football, Panthers taking on the 49ers. God, it's been a while since I've seen the Panthers in a primetime game. Let's start with them. Got Bryce Young coming off of one of the best games of his career as a startable Superflex QB2. I'm not sure we see a repeat of what we saw last week, but we have seen flashes of this with Bryce in the past. I just want to see it happen consistently before I'm regularly recommending him to people. Last week was excellent, but a lot of weeks he's under 200 yards. So I want to try to avoid quarterbacks who regularly throw under 200 yards until they don't. And this might be a week where he doesn't, but I'm not calling for it, and I'm not trusting that it will be. With the rest of the team, Rico Dowdle should be in your lineup. It wasn't as good last week, but he does find the end zone. Chuba Hubbard is basically fully phased out. And then for the wide receivers, it's Tet McMillan. Sometimes Xavier Legette will find the end zone. There's a lot of options that I would go to ahead of him, similar to Keon Coleman, drafted similarly, like we talked about in the Bills game. Some weeks he looks okay. Most of the time, you're better off looking elsewhere. For the 49ers, the final team we will cover this week, I've got Brock Purdy as someone you can start. You're definitely using McCaffrey. And then for the wide receivers, Juwan Jennings at 20, Ricky Pearsall at 31. I do not feel confident that it ends up being that way. I'm not sure if we just saw a slow Ricky Pearsall fast enough to go, if he's not fully recovered. I can't really tell. I've got him at 31, but it wouldn't surprise me if this was just flipped. The 49ers are one of the harder teams to predict, with the exception of McCaffrey and Kittle. We talked about McCaffrey. Kittle, I've got at 2. If you have him, you should be using him. And that gets us to the end of our rankings. If this has helped you set your lineup, hey, let me know with a comment. Let me know with a like. Let me know with a subscribe. I do get notifications for those. I feel them. I'm just one guy, and this is still a small channel on YouTube. Thank you for making it to the end. If you are interested, we have been doing pretty close to daily on the days where people are trading in fantasy football, not really on Mondays, but Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays. We have been dropping trade value videos on YouTube. These are things that we did on TikTok. We've been doing longer form ones on YouTube, and there's a link on your screen for one right now. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.